Hey there, I'm Sara Zarella, a portrait and wedding photographer and your host for Wedding Secrets Unveiled. This is a podcast where we cut through the complexity of wedding planning, leaving you with everything you need to know directly from the industry experts. If you want to simplify your wedding planning while having fun, of course, you came to the right place. Join me while I guide you through your planning, starting from your engagement to your big day when you say, I do. After photographing for over 20 years, I am sharing with you tips and tricks to cut through the excess noise. Because I believe from the moment you said yes, your planning experience should be a magical time in your life. Here you'll find episodes that are fun, stress-free, and straight to the point with a fresh, honest take on the reality of what you really need to know about planning your perfect day. Let's dive in. Well, welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. I'm your host, Sara Zarella. And just a quick reminder, we're on YouTube. So if you are not watching us on YouTube and you want to, check out our YouTube channel, which is Sara Zarella Photography. All right, my friends. So today we have Anansia, who is the owner of I Do Therapy. And we are going to talk about caring for your mental health while wedding planning, right? So there is a whole thing to dissect here. With that said, what we're going to do is we're going to give you some key takeaways for couples. You're going to figure out how to recognize when stress, anxiety, and grief are impacting your wedding planning. You're also going to learn some simple tools to stay grounded and connected with your partner. And then you're also going to understand that weddings are an emotional journey, and it's okay to both have joy and heaviness at the same time. So if you are planning a wedding, or you know someone who's planning a wedding, and you just want to understand how to have healthy boundaries and give some tools about how to develop those healthy boundaries, this is the podcast episode for you. Well, welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. I'm your host, Sara Zarella, and I'm very excited to have our guest today. And what we're going to be talking about, it's something that I don't think we've actually talked about in this podcast. It's something that's not talked about enough, I don't feel. So this is going to be a great episode for everybody who's planning a wedding, and if you're not planning a wedding, if you're alongside someone who is. So with that said, let's tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do, and who you serve.
Thank you so much. My name is Anansia Leslie-Bailey, and I'm a registered psychotherapist qualifying in Ontario, Canada. I'm also a mental health therapist in Florida, and I do practice all the way in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. So geographically, the closest state to me is Alaska, so it's quite cold here. Yes, my practice name is I Do Therapy, and I focus mainly on building a healthy relationship with yourselves and other people. So what that looks like is I do a lot of premarital counseling, couple work. So really just centered around understanding those patterns and how they show up in your relationships right now.
I love this. So you found that your career is starting to focus more around the wedding and what that is and that milestone in someone's life and where they're at.
Yes, absolutely.
So what made you start to focus on that? Because something happened to make you start going down that path.
That's a great question. So I would say that when I was planning my own wedding, I went through quite a bit of a struggle in terms of figuring out the logistics of the wedding. I struggled with setting boundaries. I
Oof.
struggled with, keeping in touch with my emotions and anxiety. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was happening to me, essentially. So I navigated that process without any support. I mean, I had friends, but really nobody really said, hey, this is what mental health looks like when you are planning a wedding. So, aside from that, in terms of my career, I've worked in social services for quite some time. And then, that really led me to pursue my master's in clinical mental health counseling. And then I noticed that there was not a lot of people talking about, wedding planning and those stressors. And I remember what it was like for myself. And I remember how my friends and some of my family members, how they felt during their moments. And I'm wanting to build and bridge a gap to center that focus here because it's absolutely necessary to understand what is happening to our body, what is happening to our mind, and how we can navigate this process. Because weddings are here to stay. It's just we got to figure out a healthy way to cope.
Before I get it, I have a whole slew of questions coming at you, girl. But before I get into that, do you service like all over the nation? Do you do telehealth? Do you like I'm assuming it's not just in your region, right? So you really could help anybody?
Not quite. So it
Okay.
depends. Yeah, it's a great question. So right now I service particularly certain regions across the state and in Canada. So in Canada, I can practice in Ontario because I'm licensed there. And I also can practice in the Northwest Territories because I have my certification there, and also Alberta. Now, in Florida, I can practice because I am registered there. I cannot practice across all states. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
requirements that you need, and you also do have to do an exam. So you really need to ensure that you're properly equipped to be able to support in terms of mental health.
Understood. Yeah. So that's very important for our listeners to understand what regions you can. But in
Yeah.
general, they can still get some tips. If you're not in those regions or you're not in Florida and Ontario, they can still get some tips that we're going to actually talk about today. So let's get right into it. It's interesting though that you say that, you know, weddings are here to stay. Obviously they are, and that there's a lot of stress around there. Because I'm going to tell you one thing. When I talk to a couple getting married, my first initial phone call, right? The first initial thing I say to everybody is I say, congratulations, right? Because they just got engaged usually, or if they didn't just get engaged, they're now taking the next step to plan their wedding. And one of the first vendors they plan is their photographer, right? Do you know? I mean, it's like clockwork. Do you know what I get after I say congratulations? I get on the phone and I have my first initial phone call. I've never talked to them before, and I say congratulations. Do you know what the first thing I get?
What is the first thing you get?
It is thank you so much. And I say, yes, it must be a very exciting time in your life. And they say, yes, and very stressful. Everybody,
Everybody says the
everybody.
same.
So
Yes.
I say congratulations. I say thank you very much. I say this must be an exciting time in your life. And everybody, they say it is, and it's very stressful. Everybody at
Mhm,
some length, they say something like that, but the word stressful is in there.
mhm, mhm.
So I guess my point where I'm going with this question to you is what are some common signs that people have to understand it's the wedding planning that's putting that stress and the toll on them?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of the times people are trying to plan and it's a buildup of everything happening all at once. So you're not only figuring out your routine in your everyday life, you still have work. If you have kids, you have to take care of those things. And you're still in a relationship. On top of that, you're coordinating, you're planning something, you're trying to ensure that sometimes the people pleasing comes in where you're trying to please everyone around you. So that can cause a lot of irritability because you may not be getting the things that you want in this um, during this time for wedding planning. You can have trouble sleeping. There could be tension between you and your partner. There could be a lot of fatigue. So there's so many different signs that can happen while you're planning. And that can look like you kind of shutting down at times where you may not be making decisions for yourself. That can be you feeling guilty about certain decisions in your process. That could be overcommitting to certain tasks and not seeking help because you think, okay, I got this. And because you're so used to doing things all the time and carrying things on your shoulder, that translate into this area that's currently happening. So, what I urge people to do is to really take a step back, breathe a little bit, and say, what is it that I need to get done right now? And do I need help? And if so, who can I get this support from? Those are important things to ask yourself. Um, and then on top of that, kind of figuring out where you lie in terms of your boundaries, because I think that is an important piece. If you struggled all your life with setting boundaries, more than likely that's going to show up in this space here where you're going to have a hard time saying no or even to say yes to something that you want. The wedding is um, it's just the beginning, right? You're setting yourself up for a marriage. And I think sometimes people forget about those pieces. So if you're figuring out how to say no and how to say yes, that's also going to translate into your marriage. So you can begin to practice those pieces. Now, when you are setting boundaries, you can use those simple phrases of, you know what, I appreciate your feedback. I'm going to take them into consideration. If you don't want to be so direct, I'm going to take that into consideration. That way, you don't have to say yes, you don't have to say no. Or you can just say simply, I appreciate your consideration. At this time, I really think I want to go for this instead, right? If you're feeling like you're a little bit more firm. But it's super critical to ensure that you get what it is that you need in this moment because this is your day and your partner's day, no one else's. So, really take that time to ensure that you get what you need.
And so, for our listeners, what I think we're going to do for this podcast is we're going to dive in, and hopefully, your key takeaways would be to recognize the stress and the anxiety and how it's impacting their wedding planning. And we'll talk a little bit about the tools to be grounded and connect. And then we'll also understand that we're going to go over a little bit about how the wedding is an emotional journey and how it can be heavy at times. And I think already you gave us some tools right there for our listeners is if you are getting feedback right away, you just gave them two ways to tactfully communicate, like that they're listening and they're hearing, but they're setting boundaries. And those were, could you just repeat them one more time for our listeners, those two? Because it's great what you just gave. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to say, thank you. I'm going to take that into consideration. Or you can say, you know, I appreciate your feedback. Right now, this is what I feel like I need and I want to go with. So you have one that is taking into consideration that is a little bit less, straightforward to say yes or no. You have more time to process. Or, like I said, if you're a little bit more firm and wanting to get what you need, you just say, at this time, I'm going to move forward with this decision.
Right. Because I think also too, right, for us, you are in the mental health industry and for me, I'm an outsider who's been in the wedding industry looking at how it affects people. And in general, right? There is the let's just call it like the normal wedding nerves, right? There's that. And then there's also, like you said, like the boundaries that it's approaching a mental health situation. And it's okay because you're dealing with something. Like what I'm trying to say is it's okay that you're feeling this way because I just got done saying everybody is saying the word stressful to me. It's just, what is the difference? Is it the normal wedding nerves or are we approaching like needing to set boundaries? Because I think what's happening is I think people forget that it's a huge event. Not everybody likes being in the spotlight, and some people love being in the spotlight. But there's that. But then we're also dealing with dynamics, people, families, so much. So talk to me a little bit about like how couples can tell the difference between those normal wedding nerves or a little bit deeper emotional struggle.
Yes. Great question again. And I talked about this the other day, actually, where I said sometimes it's not cold feet, right? It's you might be having a whole panic attack. You really got to know what those signs are. So if you're having a panic attack, let's say, you can have shortness of breath. You can be having, rapid heart racing, dizziness, feeling nauseous. You could be detached, and you can start feeling like something bad is going to happen, right? Now, for those instances, you really want to take a moment to take a step back, break things down, let yourself know that, in this moment, I'm here finding those grounding techniques. So there's a common one that people usually use. It's the 5 4 3 2 1, where you can find 5 things that you can touch, 4 things that you can see, 3 things that you can smell, 2 things that you can hear, 1 thing that you can taste, right? You do that all at once. That's going to give you some time to process everything and to slow the pace. Continue to implement those grounding techniques. Once you're feeling like you're more calm, reach out for that support system. Those protective factors. Protective factors are people who are supporting you, people who have your back, people that you feel safe and secure with. So if Your protective factor is the wedding planner for those moments because you spend a lot of time with the wedding planner. You reach out to that person. If your protective factor is your sister or your brother, you reach out to them. They can be able to guide you through that entire process. But that's just with panic attacks, right? But for jitters, you could be experiencing depression. You just never know what's going to pop up for you. You might feel withdrawn. You might feel a little isolated. You might feel, you don't really feel motivated to even get anything done, right? Because it could just be so overwhelming. And then you're noticing that's translating into your everyday life with your routines and even within your relationships. Because it's not just about the wedding planning, it impacts relationships. So it's important to also communicate this with your partner. They are the ones that are seeing certain things physically happening to you. But the main thing is to communicate what you're experiencing. So noticing what's happening within your body and then being able to label it and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Opening up and asking for that person to be there for you. What a partner can do for you is really say and ask that question, what is it that you need from me this week? And I narrow it down shorter instead of saying just in general. But for this week, it seems a little bit more tangible and action oriented, where now you're going back to that person and trying to say, hey, I see you. I want to be there for you. I want to support you.
So that's another really great nugget that you just gave our listeners. That's a great tool. Is if you are a listener and you are the partner, right? Or if you want to communicate with your partner what they can do to help you, just having them say to you, what can I do this week? It's like bite-sized moments, right? Great tool. Because that's what I was going to say to you is that one of my questions to you is I was thinking, like, as you were talking, I was like, a lot of times, right, when you're planning this, a lot of times the closest people, the ones that you love the most, can also be the source of stress, right? That's what makes this so stressful, right?
Yeah.
So I was just about to ask you, what can couples do to keep that line of communications? And you just answered it. That's a great tool. Is there any other tools that I'm more talking about, like the couples or like the people who are the closest to them, the ones that they rely on? But if there's a moment when that person that you rely on is not being that safety net for you, what are some tools that they can get them back on track?
Yeah. The biggest one, you don't always have to talk about the wedding. And I think people
Ooh.
forget about that, right? You're still in a relationship, you're still in this partnership. Talk about something else. Take a break. Have a moment where you could just go for a walk with each other. Because wedding planning, most times, is going to be a year to 2 years before you get to the date. That is a lot to process and take in. Just take a day to not talk about it at all.
Well, you know what also
Remember why
too
you're
is you were saying a little bit about like you're prepping yourself for marriage, right? So like yes, it's
yeah,
about the wedding, but so like that can now translate into like if you are one of those fortunate people who decide that they want to have children and keep that track going, like sometimes you always hear people say like don't always talk about your children with your spouse. Like take a date night. It's the same thing. It's about pausing, right? Is kind of what you're saying, right?
absolutely. It's necessary to pause because if you don't pause, then all those heavy feelings are just going to go right into your relationship. That's probably going to cause resentment. That's going to cause a little bit of distance between you. And you need to reignite that intimacy, right? And intimacy looks differently in a lot of unique forms. So you can want intimacy emotionally, you can want intimacy physically, but there needs to be something taking place for you to rebuild that connection and repair.
So what about so you gave us a little tools about how to connect with your partner, right? Taking a pause and maybe not only talking about weddings and also maybe just taking it in baby steps. I'm only laughing because anytime I hear baby steps, and this for some of the listeners, you're gonna have no clue what I'm talking about, and I might show a little bit of my age, like being a '90s child, but what about Bob? Like that movie where he's like, baby steps, baby steps. I always laugh about that movie. But anyway, you're saying like, what can I do this week? Right? It was a great tool, right? For a baby step. Okay, so now a bigger picture. When you're planning weddings, you are going to obviously have some grief because there is going to be some loved ones or people missing in your life, and it's a milestone that you're not able to share with them. So
Mhm.
hit me up with that. Where are we going with this?
Yes, I'm glad you brought this up. Not all the time the wedding planning is going to be happy.
Mm.
There are moments where people are grieving, and grief can look like, someone passing away, or grief can be that someone is not able to be present at the wedding. Okay. It's important to make room for both. You can feel joyous, but you can also feel that grief. And both experiences are valid and necessary. So make room for them, acknowledge what it is that's happening. Let yourself know that, right now I need extra support. I need some time. I need to rest. And that's okay. Because, you know, I think in society, we're so prone to saying, let's keep going, go go go, and then our body is the one that tends to shut down over time if we don't pay attention to it. So really pay attention to what your body is experiencing, what your mind is telling you, to take a moment for yourself. um, you can also try to find ways to honor the grief, right? So if you don't have a loved one that's present, you can incorporate that in some aspects of your planning, into your wedding day. Your partner can even just make space for you, and it can be heavy, and we can acknowledge that. But as simple as a partner saying, you know what, I miss them too. I want them there too. That's kind of giving you that validation and letting you know that you're not alone in this process. Okay.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
So, what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, let's dive in a little bit more about navigating these challenges together with your partner. And then let's talk a little bit more about some tools. I think those are some great. I think you're a amazing wealth of knowledge here. So for our listeners, we'll be right back. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you like what you're hearing, I encourage you to check out our website at sarazarella.com. And don't forget, you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And I would so appreciate if you left a fabulous review on Apple Podcast. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support. And now, let's get back to the episode. Well, welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. So before the break, we were talking a little bit about recognizing mental health and understanding if it is the normal wedding nerves or if it's something bigger. Grief, we got a little heavy there for a second, and then also too just navigating with your partner. But we're going to get right back into it. And we're giving our listeners some great tools, like literally to take away after listening to this podcast. So we're going to keep rolling with that theme because I love it. But let's just get back into it. Talk to me a little bit about some, I guess, triggers, right? Like that's happening when you're planning a wedding.
Yes. I think we're so quick to just go right into the trigger. Um, but what can happen is that something can remind you of a moment that really brought up intense emotions. So it's really important to understand what the trigger is. So the trigger can be something that is physical. It could be something that you smell and it brings up a memory. It could be something that you see. So really knowing what those triggers are, and the most important thing to do is understand what happens after you become triggered. So let's say you're planning a wedding and you hear a song that reminds you of someone that passed away, right? That could be a triggering moment for you. You really want to recognize the initial thoughts. What is it that you automatically thought of? Not the action that takes place, because sometimes people just lead with the action. Think about initially what is happening to you in terms of your thoughts. Think about what it is that you're feeling in the moment. Um, and I think sometimes people forget to really understand the importance of knowing your emotions. It's not just the basics of I'm sad, I'm angry. Under sadness, there's so many emotions that you can pull from. You can feel lonely. You can feel vulnerable. You could feel distant. So know specifically what it is that you're feeling, and then recognize your body. I talk about the body quite a bit. because your body tells you a story as well. So if you are feeling vulnerable, you might have this, gut turning feeling. You might be feeling hot. You might be feeling cold. Your back might start feeling tense. Your jaws are clenching. Your fists are tight. You just really recognize what it is that's happening in your body. After that, that's when you can start to say, you know what? Something is going on that I need to address in this moment. That's when you implement a coping strategy. So many times people come into my office and they say, can you provide me the tools? I need to figure out how to cope. And I said, what are you coping from? If you don't know what you're coping from, then they're not going to be useful for you. And on top of that, coping strategies are not there to solve your problem.
They're there to
They're
cope.
there to give you time to process what's going on, right? So, and I think that's important to remember. They're not there to solve, but they're there to give you a moment to breathe, to collect yourself, and figure out a healthy way on how to respond to the situation. So once you do all of those things, you implement a coping strategy. So you have a several strategies that you can use. You can start to do the affirmations for yourself to say, you know what, everything is going to be okay. If that's the thing that you like to use, or if you want something more drastic, sometimes people like to run cold water on their hand to jolt them back in, or warm water. You can listen to music if you feel like that's something that can support you, because music is a universal language, right? And sometimes you don't even have the words for yourself to express what it is that's taking place, but a song really translate that for you. So you can use that. You can also pull from, reaching out to people. You can mindfully eat something. That's one of my favorite coping strategies. So you could take a chocolate bar and just take a moment and notice, like, what is it that I'm tasting here? How does it feel when it's going down, in my throat? So there's so many different areas that you can pull from when you are using these coping strategies. And like I said, it gives you a moment to process. Once you're in a more calm state of mind, that's when you can begin to address those concerns. Okay. The other coping tool, journaling, is a big one
Oh,
as well.
journaling. Okay. Hey, real quick about journaling, because before I get into another question for you, journaling.
Yeah.
Can you talk to our listeners a little bit about what you mean by journaling? Like the
Yeah,
actual,
absolutely.
what actually is journaling?
Yes. Okay. So that's a form of you releasing what it is that's taking place in your mind and your thoughts, right? Because sometimes you might be having racing thoughts and it's pulling you in different directions and you have no clue on where to even begin. What's taking place when you get a piece of paper, and you don't even have to use paper to journal. You can even just record yourself on your phone to verbally say what you need to say. But you're pretty much taking a moment to put everything down and really gather your thoughts, so you can figure out a way to respond. It's getting all the initial emotions out. So whenever I see the people that I support, I tell them, go ahead and journal. I do it inside this space here. I play some music, and I kid you not, the transformation that you see from the initial moment where you're getting the intense emotions of, I'm feeling really angry, I'm feeling critical, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling abandoned. You write all of that down as raw as possible, because some people, they like to use profanity. Go right ahead. Be as raw as you can. That's your draft. Once you read your draft, then afterwards you take that and you say, okay, you know what? Yeah, I'm noticing this is actually what I'm feeling and what's taking place. What is it that I need from this to be able to communicate what I'm experiencing? What do I need from this person? You do that, then you're able to begin a repair process. You're able to begin to cope for what it is that you need, because there might be some unmet need that hasn't been addressed. So it's really important to do that for journaling.
It's funny you say that. So, just a little quick story. I have a friend of mine that I have, I met in my adult life, right? Because like now, and I'm adulting now. Here we go, people. And you
Yeah.
don't really meet people anymore, right? Like, so like when you meet those, you're like, wow, this is a special person. So like I have in the last couple of years became friendly with somebody that I met through my children, right, through school, and she's actually a therapist, and we encountered a situation, not her and I, but like we both encountered a situation and that externally that affected us. And so she's like, I got a journal. I got a journal about this. And I'm thinking to myself, what is she talking about? Journaling. So then, she's like, I'm going to go journal. And she did her thing. And then she came back with a clear mind because obviously exactly what you just talked about is what she did. And then I obviously I Googled it. I'm like, what is journaling? Because, and then I realized that I think I quote unquote journal, but I don't journal. And what I mean by that is I don't write. Writing to me is very difficult. That's a whole other issue. I'm dyslexic. So like physically writing is difficult. But you know what I do when I quote unquote journal is I talk. So like I am a type of person that like I need to physically communicate and get it out of me. So like whoever's on the receiving end of the phone, I'm sorry, but you're in my circle. And so like there's a joke where they say like, oh, have you talked to Sara? It's like, I'll say like, hey, you have 5 minutes to talk. Everybody's like, Sara doesn't talk for 5 minutes. Like this is a half an hour talk, but this is me journaling. Yeah. I get it all out. So like I'll swear, I'll just ramble, I'll just get it all out. And then after I'm done, I feel so good. But it's like all that was just like, I'm not looking for somebody to like solve my problem. Just listen. That's me journaling. Does that make sense? It's a release is what you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I mentioned. It doesn't have to just be with paper.
Right.
Right. You can go on your notes. I do it all the time. I go in my notes and I'm like, this is what happened today and I can't believe it. And you just let it all out and
Yeah.
let it flow. And like I said, it's the initial process. You get all the raw feelings and intense emotions.
Get
And
it
then
out.
afterwards you read it and you're like, oh, actually, maybe this is what I mean here
Right.
and what I want to say and what I actually need. Because there's a level of vulnerability that comes from these emotions, right? And with anger, that's the secondary emotion. It's not the initial emotion you usually feel. And I say that
That's the
because
mask, right? Or the
that's
mask.
the
That's the
mask.
mask. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is the mask,
Yeah.
and when you're feeling angry, it's usually a buildup of something over time,
Over
right?
time. Yeah.
But when you initially look at it from the very beginning, let's say somebody called you a name.
Mm-hmm.
It hurt my feelings initially. It made me feel critical it made me feel disappointed,
Mm-hmm.
right? I can't believe you did this to me. How could you do this to me? I can't believe you made me feel disappointed and sad now. How dare you? Now I'm angry at you. That is how it comes out. So we really need to, with the journaling, you lay all the anger out, you lay it down, but then as you go through it, all those other emotions comes
Come
through,
through, and you can see it. Yeah.
and then you can start to
And
see
that
it.
exercise you explained is the same exercise that I get when I just start saying everything. Then it's clear. It's like I'm talking it through out loud. Like I got to hear myself. So maybe instead of subjecting all these people to me on my phone calls, maybe I just say it to my phone next time.
I mean, you can try it out, right? You can try it
I
out.
try it out.
It's still great that you have those, people around you to support you through it, but yeah, I encourage people, try it out and see
Try it
what
out.
works for you, right?
So getting back to weddings though, right? So let's talk a little bit about um I want to talk about the big F, and people are like what is the big F? But it's not what you think it is.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, a little bit about family dynamics, cultural expectations. Obviously, and then the big F, the financials. All right, so there is a lot of triggers going around wedding planning and that. So let's talk a little bit about that. And that's a lot. There's that's a lot.
Let's break it down
I
in
know. I
layers.
was about to say, like, how do I just threw out. Talk about journaling. I
Yeah,
just threw out a lot at you.
yeah, and it's absolutely necessary. So let's talk about the family first, right? A family, they're going to be a part of the wedding, and they're going to have lots of opinions, and sometimes it can be very critical. And it's difficult, as I mentioned, to set boundaries if you've, had struggles over time to do so, right? The way that we navigate our situations is a direct reflection of our childhood experiences. So if you grew up with family members that have always been critical, you may end up wanting to be people pleasing. And that can show up in your wedding planning because now if you say, you know what, I don't want this color for my wedding, and then your mom or another person's like, I want this color, you may now start to feel a little bit more pressure to add that or include it into some aspects, even though you really don't want this for yourself. Okay. It's so important, as I keep on saying, setting those firm boundaries. And we talked about that earlier. But also, you want to acknowledge, right? You can acknowledge a family member, but not to absorb it. Okay. Because that could be detrimental to your soul. It's so important to figure out what it is that you want and need. I keep on expressing the wedding day is not for them, it is for you as well. At the same time, I want to acknowledge the cultural nuances because with family, there is going to be some traditions where, yes, the wedding is you're unifying the family, they're coming together. And how you can begin to support that is by making sure that you and your partner are in agreement, right? You talk with one another before you go off and talk with the family. So having that sit down conversation where you're both on the same page can really set the tone moving forward in how this pans out for you. Because what I see often during the wedding planning is that one person doesn't want something and the other person is a little bit more reserved, doesn't stand up for their partner. And then they're walking in with the family members that are a little bit more intense. And then now you're dealing with a partner that feels like you abandoned them, that feels like you were not supporting them. And then it trickles into the marriage, past even the wedding day. All right.
And we talked a little bit about earlier that this is a marriage that you're
Mhm.
preparing for, not just a wedding. And, so I always tell people, like, what happens between those 10 seconds that you walk down the aisle doesn't change, right? Like you don't all of a sudden walk down the aisle and whatever stressors or triggers or family dynamics or cultural expectations doesn't all of a sudden just change, right? Like you don't like go over down the aisle and it just all goes away. Like it is there. Like that's what you're marrying into, right? So so I tell people like, well, here's a story. I'm just going to share a personal story. Um, you know, you everything that you're experiencing now probably you're going to experience for the rest of your marriage. It's just like you got to have the tools, right? So like I tell people like whatever let me back up. So little story, right? When I was getting married to my husband, I he had one job, let's call it job, to do for the wedding planning process, and that was to find suits, tuxes, right? And to his no, I mean to no surprise to me, but to exactly like on cue for what how he does things. Do you think he did that? No. Like that was his one thing, one job. Did he pull through at the final hour? Absolutely, sure. But like, here's the thing: do in my marriage, that is what happens, right? Like he didn't change when I walked down that aisle to meet him. Like I knew eyes wide open that is his vice and that's what I was marrying him with. And I'm sure there's a whole laundry list of what he was marrying me with. It doesn't mean it's not this perfect scenario. It's just, you have to understand like all of these situations that are coming out, right? These dynamics, they're not going away. They're actually exposing themselves. So like
Yeah.
that's what's so stressful, because like some of these things, like I knew as soon as I gave him that one job, I'm like this is not going to get done. Like it's just not. And like and it didn't. Well, it did, but didn't. Like not whatever. You tell me if it did or didn't. I don't know. I mean, did they have suits and tuxes? Sure, but like, was it with assistants? Sure. But my point is, that's how it is now. Like 11 years later, I could still say I'm happily married, but like when I give him something, and some people will say like, "Oh, a honey to-do list. Is it going to get done?" No, but that's his vice. But there's like a whole gazillion things that he does to make up for it, right? So my point, what I'm trying to say is, I hope our listeners understand that like what is being exposed or shown or what you're going through is what you're marrying into.
You're going to be taking into, yeah, absolutely. And that's a great way of putting it. And just going back into the importance of communicating as a couple. Um, for me, I'm trained in imago therapy, and it's a beautiful approach that centers around communication. And you're implementing a dialogue on really centering yourselves in each other's world, because most times when you're getting into an argument, it's not even about the argument itself, it's about how this person is making you feel. And sometimes you're taking all of that from the childhood and it's walking into the space, because your partner might, they may have said no to you. You're now feeling dismissed, and it's reminding you of when you were dismissed when you were a child, right? So you're taking the image of the past showing up here. What I use with couples is, I support them through the dialogue process where they can say, you know, this is how I'm feeling. So you're sending a message. The other partner is responsible for mirroring what they're hearing. Everything else that they feel, it's still valid, but it's not your time to respond and be defensive. You're really just taking in what's happening. What that person's response is, what I heard you say was, you're mirroring back what you're hearing. And then they're checking for accuracy. Did I get you?
Mm-hmm.
When someone says, did I get you? You're going to now, as a partner, say, oh, I'm going to really have a moment here. Did he get the message? Let me now see if that's the case. You can say yes, or what I want you to get was actually this. That's reaffirming you in terms of your experience. Once that person mirrors, gets it, they then ask, is there more? Those few words makes a huge difference, because so many times when we're expressing ourselves, we feel rushed. Or sometimes I notice people say, oh, it's okay, never mind. They just dismiss themselves because of what they're used to. When you're given a space to really process your feelings, to really share everything you need, that's when your needs are getting met. So it's a beautiful way for us to center ourselves back as a unit, because communication is important. The marriage, the wedding will happen, but once you have a good foundation in communicating, you can tackle on any occurrence, even with family dynamics.
Right. And I think what I was sharing was a little bit about acceptance, like understanding when you communicate and your partner accepts, like you got to take the good, the bad, the positive, the ugly, and then, kind of getting into the big F before we get into our wrap up question, just really quickly to touch upon that, financial pressures. You know, you I mean, I hate to say it, but then, I mean, because a lot of our listeners haven't even started into the marriage yet. They're at the wedding planning. But the big recipe for disaster, for divorce, the big D, is the big F, which is the financial issues. And so now, no wonder why you're all feeling stressed. You're now dealing with financials too.
Mhm. Absolutely. It's a whole mixture of everything just pulling all at once. And like I said, if you struggle with boundaries, you may struggle with saying no to certain things that are costing quite a bit of money, right? Especially in this economy, people are struggling. People are really struggling immensely. So it's important to have firm boundaries, but also knowing what those expectations are as a couple and sticking to them, right? So having that communication and saying, okay, what is our budget? How much are we willing to spend? Because you don't really want to go into this wedding and that marriage, and you're carrying a load of debt, right?
Mm-hmm.
That carries and stays with you, and that's when you start to have a lot of that financial pressure and strain in the marriage. So really having those conversations. The other thing I've noticed recently is the pressures of social media to
Oh,
have a
geez. That's a whole other. Like, I literally can have you on, and we should have you back on, and talking about social media and when it has to do with marriage in wedding. I mean, that's a whole show in itself.
Whole show in itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because now you're not only just doing it for yourself, you're trying to impress every single person in the
Yes.
world. That
Yes.
costs a lot of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're seeing all these things come at you all at once, really ensuring that you ask those questions, is this necessary for the for the unity of my marriage? Is that going to be beneficial? Am I going above my means? Because I will be candid with you, I didn't actually go through with a real wedding. I just went to the courthouse. And and I saved quite a bit of money from that. And we've been married, happily married 7 years now. But it may not be the same for everybody, right? And if you feel like you want to go through the wedding planning, definitely do that. Do what your heart is telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Same time, be mindful of how much you are willing to spend. Not, getting into the social media pressures or family pressures or anyone else. It's about you and what you're taking into your marriage. You want to make sure that you set yourself up for a good foundation.
Yeah, and also too, it's that like you said, you didn't feel like you needed the celebration, the wedding. For a lot of people, they want that. Like there's very few things in life that you can celebrate. So a wedding is one of them. So for our listeners, it's okay if you want to go down to the courthouse. It's okay if you want to have a big wedding. But like you said, financials look different for everybody. And where you spend your money on the wedding too, that's something else. Like you might have a great budget, a
Yes.
big one for that matter, but it's also still going to have some financial pressures because you have to figure out where you want to spend it. Like there's some areas that you're going to not spend your money and put your money in because you don't value it, and there's some areas that you do. I mean, that's a whole other subject too. But what we
Yes.
can do is for our closing reflections of our conversation today. Normally, I ask the guest the same question over, right? I think for you, I think I would just love to just like, what are some closing reflections? If there is three things that people can think and take away from our conversation today and hold on to, what three things would you like our listeners to take away?
Yes. Remembering, first thing, you're on the same team. You and your partner are getting married. Okay. You're on the same team, which means those decisions that you're going to be making, you try to communicate as best as you can, as healthy as you can, um, to get what it is that you need. Remembering that you don't have to always talk about the wedding as well. You know, it's a part of the process, yes, but really ensuring that you rebuild and repair that intimacy between you two, and that connection is what's going to make this marriage solid. Remembering that the marriage also, it's the most important thing. Okay, the wedding will happen, but you're there for the marriage, the unity. Okay, and the last thing I would say too, boundaries. Okay, it's okay to say no. It's okay to say, hey, at this time, I'll take that into consideration. I'll get back to you. You don't have to be as firm right in the moment, but as long as you're getting what it is that you need, just set them as much as you can.
I love it. I could talk to you all day long. I think we need to have you back on about the social media
Yeah,
pressures.
I'm here.
I think that I'm going to take you up on that. So also too, before we go, what's your wedding hot take? I put you on the
Oh,
spot.
my wedding hot take.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like I've already kind of like mentioned it, but the social media thing
Mm.
it's so much pressure. I feel that, a lot of the times we kind of forget what it really means to get married. And yeah, go to therapy before you get married.
I love it.
That's my hot
There's
take.
your hot take. Check me. Um,
Go to therapy.
so, with that said, I just want to thank you so much for being on this week's episode of Wedding Secrets Unveiled. You helped all of our listeners hopefully become one step closer to a stress free wedding planning process. Also, too, for our listeners, if you want to see our episode on YouTube, if you're not already watching on YouTube, we are on YouTube, which is at the Sara Zarella Photography YouTube channel, and Zarella is 2 R's, 2 L's. But also, too, for all of our listeners, I will have all of our episode show notes on our blog, which you can find at sarazarella.com/podcast. But also, too, can you let the listeners know where to find you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram. That's Anansia_Bailey. And you can also find me on my website, www.ido-therapy.com, and my email, info@ido-therapy.com.
And thank you so much, Anansia, for being on this week's episode of Wedding Secrets Unveiled.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Wedding Secrets Unveiled. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you something. I encourage you to check out our website at sarazarella.com. We love photographing while having fun, of course. Check out our podcast page on our website for our show notes, along with upcoming episodes with your local wedding experts. Listen in as we help you plan your epic event. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening so you never miss an episode. I would so appreciate if you left a review for us on Apple Podcasts. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support, and let us know what you think. If you know any wedding experts that would like to be a guest, we have a link directly on our website where they can let us know. Thank you for listening.